allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And next agenda is approval of the minutes from the August 8th meeting.
I'll make the motion, you want it?
Send them to the floor.
Oh, did we skip President's Floor?
Yes, we did.
President's Floor, anybody? Anybody? Okay. On to approval of the minutes. Jim.
I'll still make the.
Anybody second? Megan second. Any discussion or changes to the minutes?
I'm sorry, that was Jim and Megan?
Yeah. We're good? Okay. No changes to the minutes, so yeah, need to vote. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Unanimous. All right. Treasurer's report.
Thank you, Bernie. Good evening, everyone. So we have the reports here for August, month 2. You can see we have the standard, the check listing, the profit and loss and balance sheet for both the new building fund and the general fund. So starting with the general fund, the salaries year-to-date are slightly above budget because we have 2 employees who were paid in August, but they're one's a retiree and one left. So the first payroll in September and the one we're about to do this week should be below budget. So when you take that into account, salaries year-to-date are pretty much on or slightly under budget. I entered some of the books from July in Baker and Taylor, but I'm still getting a little bit caught up on that. There was in programs, juvenile, there was a lot that hit for the summer, obviously. That's why that expense is a little bit above budget for the month of July, and not August, but mainly in July. But year-to-date, it's over because they have their programs in the summer, more or less. Same things with the Ken's programs, community development. That's we just paid him a second installment, but he's $10,000 for the year. We paid him about half, so we kind of paid it a little earlier. But that's kind of how we did it last year. And no major building repairs or anything. The painting was all. Oh, and last month, Bernie, we moved that one $4,000 expense that was incorrectly in July. We moved it to June, so that's why you don't see that in here. That was taken care of because it was originally the work was done in June. And the total expenses, you can see, we're starting out way under budget. 171,350 compared to 202,747. So even accounting for the books that haven't been entered, we're still running 20,000 under budget. We did also, I forgot to mention or to show you, we got the preliminary number for the retirement report, and it's going to be the estimate said 66,000, but now the latest projection says 70,000, like a hair over 70,000. So I think we're going to be right on budget for the retirement for the year. We were hoping that would be below the 70, but that's one of those things for the last few years. They've been sending us an estimate, then a projection, then the final number, because the bills have been so big. They want to give you more time to plan for it. But we were hoping that would be under, but it doesn't look like it's going to be. But it's going to be pretty much right where we budgeted for the 70,000. And on the balance sheet, you can see for the operating fund, $307,000 between the key general fund checking account and then the Orange County general fund money market account. We should be getting our first tax levy check at the end of September or early October. Sometimes it's September 30th, sometimes it's the first week in October. So that'll be another half of what's the full year? So 655,000 minus the 200,000 TAN, so we're looking at 450 some odd thousand, so we should be well funded, ready to go for the year. And shifting to the new building fund, there wasn't really much activity. I think we only paid 3 checks. We paid Butler, Rowland, and Mays that one check, 1010 for 45,000, and then we paid those 3 checks to the Village of Goshen. I think that was at the last meeting when Jay was here. So they were cut in August, so we paid about 55,000 out. And as you can see, we have, well, the balance sheet says we have 608,000. We really have 657,000 because we got that construction grant check, which I think I mentioned at the last meeting. I deposited, I just forgot to enter it in QuickBooks before I printed this report. So really, we have 657, almost 658,000 in the new building account. The 49,000, that was the 90% of full 55,000. So we'll still be getting another check for 5,500, but that comes at the very end. I think it said July of next year. So
And any other projects? Yeah.
right, and then the other one that we're applying for as well, right? So we got plenty in the capital projects fund as well, and you can see the profit and loss didn't really, just those 3 or 4 checks that we cut in the capital projects fund. And also one other point, the auditor's been in for the last couple of weeks a few times, and everything seems to be going really well. So hopefully the audit will be wrapped up, or at least her field work will be wrapped up in the next few weeks, and then she's going to start working on the report. So anticipate it's going easier this year because we're having Lorelei and Dina back, where last year was their first year back after a while, and switching from the other auditors. So it's going pretty smoothly this year. So that's more or less where we're at. That it's making the office a little messy, but it's going well. So that's the main thing. And more or less, that's pretty much where we're at.
Any questions, comments? Okay,
Great.
all right,
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
to the director's reports.
Good evening, everybody. The major events for the month were the newsletter, the fall newsletter. Take a motion.
Motion to accept.
Oh, we need to accept the director's report? Okay.
No,
No.
treasurer's.
Treasurer's report, sorry, treasurer's report. We need a motion to, okay, Emily, and seconded by Keith. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
So yes, back to me. The newsletter should be actually hitting mailboxes any day. I don't know, did it this week? Emily, thank you for your piece. Your neighbor's piece for the newsletter. What else? Oh, the grant for the this year's DLD go round with the state education department. A lot of help from Megan and the architect, but we got it in. I haven't heard back from RCLS yet. The actual deadline, I think, for the state is something like October 5th, but we give it to RCLS the 1st of September to give them time to vet it, to make sure that everything's in order. This year, it's for the preliminary work on the geothermal well fields. And in regards to the site preparation, I spoke with the architects recently, and we should have a timeline any day now for the raising of the so-called nuns' quarters. Something that should take place in the fall. So, we had a very part-time, 7 hours a week at that clerk, Sally Morosa, that resigned. Paige Cody has taken over her duties. She's basically doing a fantastic job. She's picked up the duties of 2 other workers and we've kind of consolidated into one full-time spot position. And so far, so good. She's doing an excellent job. Katie Edson, as you know, has gone, but she's still working with us as our web designer / maintainer. She's been very obviously on top of that, but just by contract until we can figure out how we want to deal with that down the line. Legislative breakfast, I'm sure you all know, is taking place at the Bear Mountain Inn on Friday. This Friday coming up at 8 a.m. I'm sure a couple of people will be there. I'll be there. Oh, the cost estimate for the geothermal well, system preliminary work is $249,000. We hope to get around 50% of that paid out, but can't guarantee it. But that's, last year we got 50% of the, what we asked for the nuns quarters, so keep your fingers crossed. I know that RCS has a little more money to play with than they did last year, so we'll see what happens. On August 23rd, Bernie, Keith, and I accompanied Paul and Jay to the village planning board meeting. Jay has had subsequent conversations with the village engineer. I have some information I'll send out to the new building committee as to where they're at this point. I think it's important that we probably sooner than later schedule a time to talk with the town supervisor, Kyle Roddy, and with whomever is the chair of the, this is a little mysterious, of the joint rec. I'm not sure. I put my feelers out, so I'm trying to figure out who that would be. But I spoke to Paul about this as well, because time is probably right to have library officials in the same room at the same time with the town, the village, and joint rec, just because there's a few things with the park that could probably be better done jointly than separately. And I know that Bernie's spoken with Kyle, and he sounds like he's interested in the discussion. It's just a matter of getting everybody together at the same time. So I think that's sort of next on the list. And we'll be working to put something like that together.
What are you talking about, sidewalk?
What's that?
Sidewalk?
Sidewalks, sewage, possibly. Those are the two main things, I guess. Oh, and the, not causeway, what do you call it? The easement. There's some question about how, according to the verbiage of the contract or agreement with the village, the easement agreement dissipates, for lack of a better term, as soon as work starts at the site. So we're going to have that be engineered, discussed, and
Why is that?
I don't know. That's the way that, it's just the way the contract's written.
Yes, we need to follow up on, we'll be following up on that, see how it can be re-drafted to allow that. And part of that discussion is also gonna be, discussion with Paul Mays in terms of whether we need a separate construction entrance, because that's going to play into it. Well, we can talk about that after the,
So the park was granted an easement to build construction that gives on that land?
Right.
What?
That's how we read it. And
So
then
that, but I can understand why that would be, because whoever bought the land might want to put the building right where the easement is.
Sure.
So it gives the owner of the land more flexibility.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's why it was written that way. So now, we're in a pretty good position.
Yes, yeah.
Because, we can, expand the easement, restrict the easement, move the easement. We don't really need to.
Maybe sort of designed around it.
Yeah, we sort of assumed it was a fixed item, but it
Right.
really wasn't. We could have moved that building over
Mm-hmm.
further if we wanted to. But we're not gonna do that.
part of the issue with that is the curb cuts on the state
Right,
highway.
right, right.
So we need to, there's a lot more involved in moving the curb cuts, so since that is the designated entrance right now, it's gonna stay that way as far as we're concerned.
There was talk about a possible need for an emergency entrance, a secondary entrance in case there was something was blocked there, if there was a fire.
Like where?
I think that's correct. That's a good question. We have a couple ideas.
Well,
but
if a fire truck were to enter and then blocking other emergency vehicles from entering, if we were to have some type of fire or even emergency ambulance, whatever the case may be, to have a second entrance specifically for additional vehicles.
Not to our property, to the park.
Park.
itself.
Well, even if our entrance is the only way in, because the main gate, the main entrance is not really a vehicle entrance right now. So if our entrance is the only one for vehicle entrance, we need to take these considerations into account.
So why would it be our responsibility to provide a second entrance for the park? Other than the park would assume that responsibility. If they have land that goes all over the Coleman Road, they could just simply.
Not simply.
Well,
There's no simply.
they have lots, in other words, they have exposure on Craigdale Road, exposure on Main Street, and exposure on.
Right.
I don't see why we should say, oh, we'll have two entrances, but they've got all that land, and, they should.
Well, we're not saying that.
Wait, we're saying we're gonna discuss
We're not
that.
saying two entrances.
We're saying that's one of the things we need to discuss with the interested parties.
I think that's more or less what it's about. It's just getting the interested parties in the same room at the same time to hash some of this stuff. Because it's a little confusing at this point, where the jurisdiction of one entity ends and where the other begins. And there's some confusion just from conversations I've had. And it might be easiest to dispel some of that, or at least make some order out of it by having the people together at the same time and going through some of these questions.
Always good,
You
sure.
know? You know.
Yeah, I mean, the same discussions occurred when 207 was being repaved, and concern about redoing the water line, and it turned out that there was no concern because the water line's not there under the highway. So those are the same type of things that we're targeting, is like just making sure that we're doing everything most efficiently, so that there's no after effects or unanticipated after effects.
But there's no options that you've thought of to date on the second entrance, or
No.
are there?
It again depends on making more. It would depend on making more curb cuts, which is assumedly the biggest problem with that. Having construction interests would be beneficial because the trucks would come into a different entrance than the regular park traffic. That might be better, and also depending on the layout of the construction equipment, the construction materials while everything's going on. So there's a lot to be concerned about.
Is it you're thinking taking down some of the fence before you get to the entrance, taking down some of the fence over here as an entrance, or what are you thinking?
We don't have any.
Okay.
Yeah. It's gonna. That's where the engineer and the highway department would talk about, or the DPW and the highway department.
And the
would talk
state
about.
would have to approve that too.
Right.
There is the possibility also, I haven't looked into it too much, but when I was over there, there's the driveway that runs, what is that, the VFW? Yeah, is that?
Oh, that.
Perhaps, working with them to use that as a secondary way in, because it's already curb
Yeah, I
cut.
was just
and
thinking
it's-
that if we were to put a road, so to speak, a gravel even road over to their property,
Right.
that in an emergency, we could do in that track.
Just by looking at the terrain, it might be.
But it might not be necessary.
Right.
Right.
Because it's not going to be a trivial thing.
No.
Let me tell you.
What I'd
Okay.
like to see is a roundabout where this light is in the corner of Scotchtown and 207.
Well,
Because that would solve the problem of there's three different times when you get
Mhm.
there.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And that is a monster traffic jam every morning, every day.
I never come in from that way, but I've heard complaints.
People cut through the back of the bank.
Okay.
Building on the corner, not bank.
Right.
Commercial building.
Alright, onward, let's see, the agreement between the library and the community foundation is officially signed off on by both parties, and, what else did before I get to the friends. Well, we'll have more to discuss, I mean, we're gonna meet with the the new building committee on October 10th at 5:30, so that'll be a good time to talk about some of this, the details, the nitty-gritty about some of the stuff we're talking about now.
That'll be here.
That'll be here. Other than that, the Friends had a great, I don't know if I reported this already, I don't think so, I think it was right before our last meeting, but anyway. Great big band, an ice cream social, big turnout. And the antique appraisal is coming up, I think, let's see, October 2nd?
October 2nd, Sunday.
5, Parish Hall, St. James Episcopal Church. I think that's all I have for now. Any questions?
Questions, comments? And we don't approve the director's report? Okay, alright. Moving on to committee reports. Capital projects, we have the note that there was a meeting on October 10th at 5:30 here. And that's intended to be open for everyone, so we'll be open to not just the committee.
I believe that, Paul said that he'll have an engineer there to discuss some of the details about, some of the mechanicals of the building, but we have some questions for him as well. But,
Is Jay going to be there as well?
I'm not sure. I'll ask, I'm sure he
Yeah.
did.
Because he might have, there might be some discussion.
Yeah, Jay's pretty flexible, he seems to come with enough of the door, so I'll ask him.
We've got over a number of things already there. We're still waiting on, did we get the letter from, the preliminary letter for the geotech, that the archaeologist did?
Yes, well, I needed that for the ship